come for the festival, eh? Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Return of the Archons, which is episode 23 of season 1 of Star Trek The Original Series. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Original Series. One episode at a time. In this video I will cover the episode Return of the Archons. So, Return of the Archons is the episode where while investigating a planet, Sulu beams up, behaving very, very strangely and not knowing who he is. And so, the crew member he was with is missing, so Kirk assembles a landing party to search for this crew member, and they find a very strange, stagnant society where everyone seems to have blank, expressionless, emotionless states of mind, and then all of a sudden they talk about a festival, and the festival happens, they all just go crazy and start acting nuts and harming each other. And then the second the festival's over, they all go back to their plain normalness. So after Kirk is investigating, he finds out that the society is under mind control from a supercomputer called Landru, who tries to enact peace and tranquility, but through a version of stripping away any sense of individuality. So, and the Landru then tries to destroy the Enterprise and tries to absorb Kirk and his landing party into this mind control. So Kirk fights back with the help of a resistance and manages to destroy Landru by logicking it to death. And then leaves the society a better place. Hi, Lillian. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know. This episode was never a favorite of mine growing up. It does remind me, and I talked a lot about in other shows, how I don't really like episodes about cults. There's a lot of shows that have one episode that's themed of cults. Usually sci-fi shows that I watch, like Stargate, and a few other things as well. And for some reason, I'm just not interested in cults. I don't know, maybe because I've never had that personal experience and knew anyone who had that personal experience. It's just not something, and I'm just not interested in sort of religious sects in general. So it's just not an interest of mine. And this episode's not necessarily a cult episode, but it kind of is. I think that's the clear analogy that is being made here, from the way they dress and the way they speak. How they are all a peaceful tranquility to do remind me of Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses or something like that. So I think that's kind of the image that they're trying to evoke. Now, I think when you have these sci-fi concepts that have these strange sci-fi scenarios, sometimes it's obvious to tell the analogy that they're going for by how it's phrased, the setting, the clothes that people wear. One big example I'm thinking of is The Matrix. The Matrix was a movie trilogy about an alien AI that took over humanity and put them in an artificial reality where they thought they were living out their normal lives, but they're actually being controlled by the AI in order to harness their energy for batteries. And but so that could mean anything. The analogy could mean anything, but the setting of the movie very clearly makes it clear that is an anti-corporate message or anti-authoritarianism, and specifically railing against modern day authority figures such as the FBI, because the supercomputers take on the form of FBI or CIA agents. They just call them agents, so it could be generic. and our protagonists take the form of hackers, of sort of more the cyberpunk style. So it's obvious they're going for a sort of cyberpunk theme, where the hackers or the miscontents, the malcontents, lesser part of society are the heroes. So you have the vague concept of the AI controlling humans, putting in artificial reality, and you could shape it any way you like depending on the setting. And so they chose the setting of this particular style, but to send a particular message. And so that's what Return of the Archons do, because they have this supercomputer that's controlling a society by having this mind control, saying this is peaceful tranquility. But they specifically chose a setting that is really reminiscent of like pilgrims or religious cults or religious sects, or ones more stricter religions. And so I feel like that is the specific analogy that they're making here, because I know some people brought up like communism and extreme socialism, like Soviet Union and whatnot. But I feel like if that was the analogy they were making, then the setting would resemble more of that. Like they might give them Russian accents, or maybe they wouldn't want to be that obvious. Maybe they would just put them someplace cold, like have them in like an Arctic type setting, something that kind of signifies what because as I said, the setting, the tone, the clothing, the wardrobe, everything kind of really helps cement the analogy. But they specifically chose like something that reminds me of like Mormons or pilgrims or something like that. So that's why I feel like this message, more so than communism, is a commentary against sort of religious cults, and how they indoctrinate people, and people involved with the cult tend to say, "Oh, we're peaceful, this is a great living. You should all experience this loving living," but really, it strips away their individuality, which is what this episode speaks to, but to the extreme. Now, could you apply this analogy to extreme socialism and communism and stuff like that? Yeah, absolutely, you could, but I don't think that is, when I nail it down to more specifics, I think it applies more, because of the setting, to those religious cult or religions that try to get you to join their religion and strip away any sense of individuality. So for the most part, I think this episode is commentary against cults, and to a lesser extent against religions in general. And the communists and all that, I think, would come after that. But then again, that is just my interpretation. I'm sort of being kind of anti-religious myself, so perhaps I'm letting some of my personal feelings influence, but I'm trying to look at it objectively. And as I said, objectively, the setting does not resemble Soviets to me. It more resembles cult. But especially the way they talk, they're like, "Come for the festival, eh? Yeah." and the way they're all just, yeah, I don't know. And they're calm and whatever, and they're playing and it's also not just the setting and the wardrobe, but the language they use. They talk about peace and tranquility, where it seems like if it was more of a Soviet thing, they would be saying words like the greater good more, or the common good, or it's the language that kind of gives it away. So the peace and tranquility thing does lean more religious than what the propaganda that the Soviets would put out. But that's just me. And because of that, as I said, I've never been big into cult episodes. And usually I really don't like them. This one I don't dislike that much, but I never latched onto it because of that. It had that sort of detachment where I never really got interested in it. And the plot was pretty straightforward. Like, Kirk is and crew are running away. And it feels like this is one of the episodes, and especially rewatching it just now, something that really frustrates me is episodes when the audience gets to the conclusion before the main characters. And more than that it kind of feels like it's taking the main characters too long. Like, it feels like it takes Kirk way too long to figure out what's actually going on in this episode, where the audience is very clear what's happening, and the fact that he tries to take his security man with him, and the guy who's working with them that lives there was like, no, he's been absorbed, he'll give us away, and Kirk doesn't listen to him, takes him there anyway. Now eventually Kirk does have the good sense to sedate him so that he doesn't wake up, but he's still, the other guy has to convince them, and Kirk still doesn't get it. And I'm like, it's freaking obvious to the audience that he's been brainwashed, he'll turn on you. How can you not get that? So it's a bit frustrating. Now, one thing I wanted to talk about is the festival, because when I saw the Purge movies, my first thought when I first heard of the Purge movies, it was the first Purge movie, and, well, not the one called The First Purge, but the first movie they released called The Purge. It's confusing. But anyway, so when I first saw the trailers for it, when I first heard of it, I'm like, that's Return of the Archons. Basically, they got the idea from Return of the Archons, which, not necessarily. It's a general enough concept. I'm sure. Perhaps one of the writers or people who came up with the concept saw this episode and was influenced either consciously or subconsciously by it. But it doesn't have to be, because it's a general enough sci-fi concept. But just as a Star Trek fan, that was the first thing that I come to when I saw the trailer for this episode. Was not the episode, the Purge, was that, they're just doing Return of the Archons, because that's basically... Now, there's differences, because in this case, they're kind of brainwashed. They never fully explained the point of the festival was, I guess. Like, if the supercomputers controlling them, like, why did they need them to freak out and start attacking each other like crazy and going nuts for an hour? Or was it an hour? They called it the Red Hour, but it seemed to last more than an hour, because it was dark when it started and it was daylight when it ended. But whatever, however long it was, I don't really see the point to it, but I suppose it's for them to get out their aggression or whatever, because they're so pale-faced and blank for the rest of the time. I don't know, and maybe it just speaks to Landru's sort of control. And the question I have is, who cleans up all that broken glass and mess? But anyway, the Purge kind of reminded me of that. Now, yes, it's different because, they're not, in the Purge, not brainwashed, it's just normal society, and it's just the government decides, hey, once a year, we're going to remove every single law. And the only law people focus on, or at least they focus on in this movie, is murder. Like, nobody thinks to file their taxes on that day and totally cheat, but they'd be protected by the Purge, or speed through red lights, or what else could you do? I don't know. But anyway, so yes, it's only slightly similar in that there's a designated time where everyone goes fucking nuts and kills each other and goes crazy. But all the specifics around it is different. So I don't think it's a ripoff at all, but it's just, that's what it reminded me of, and I do wonder if that's where the idea came from. Now, other thing I gotta say with the festival is the line, "Come for the festival, yeah." I always remember that, and I talked about this in a different video, how when I was growing up, there was alternative rock radio station. And I talked about in different videos the connection between alternative rock and Star Trek. In fact, it was my love for alternative rock that led me to Star Trek, which is weird because it's not a strong connection, but it seemed like the alternative alternative rock station I listened to in the area I grew up, HFS, would often play all these Star Trek clips and I thought like parodies of Star Trek, and there just seemed to be a lot of connection. That there was a whole song of the "You Klingon bastard, you killed my son," which apparently originated from that radio station. So at least for that station, there was a connection to Star Trek and alternative rock, and that's how I originally found Star Trek, which is strange. I suppose, kind of like the connection that the hippie movement and Lord of the Rings, where Tolkien said they had nothing to do with hippies, it's just something that happened. But anyway, there was this HF festival was what they call it. So the HF Festival. So the HFF, the F in HFS was meant to say be the F in festival, get it? But anyway, it was a concert where they had a bunch of bands play, and they did it once a year. I saw bands like PJ Harvey, Primus, the Ramones. Who else did I say? A few other bands, mostly not that huge, not like really, really big named. I mean, the Ramones are pretty big, but mostly more of into the alternative rock. There was a lot of one-hit wonders that were there throughout the years. But anyway, so there was one year when I went there and they were playing commercials advertising the HF Festival, and the commercial they played was a clip from this episode of the guy saying, "Come for the festival, eh?" Which and this is after I started watching Star Trek, so I was already into Star Trek, so I got the reference, and I thought it was the funniest thing ever when I heard that. And so I think all day long when I was at the HF Festival, I was saying to people I'm with, is "Come for the festival, eh?" all day. So that kind of stuck in my memory, but I guess it doesn't really have anything to do with this episode. But that's just why that line always that's what I remember most about this episode, honestly, was that line. Now, the episode itself, it's okay, I guess. Like there's really not much there. I don't know. I suppose I'm not a huge into these analogies of individualism versus collectivism. And this, of course, and people had pointed out, this kind of precursor to the Borg, which explores this issue in a more sort of stronger way. However, I talked about the Borg when I did my Q Who review, about how a lot of people assume, and Voyager kind of definitely made it this way, like the Voyager writers felt this way as well, that this was a commentary against extreme socialism, and that individualism versus socialism. But I actually think it was more of Roddenberry originally intended to be more a commentary on capitalism, which is something we know that he constantly wanted to make commentaries on in the early years of TNG, which is when the Borg was first thought up of. Like the concept was first created during season 1 of TNG, even though we didn't meet them until season 2 of TNG. And so I've heard the analogy that the Borg ships are meant to be like office buildings, and the assimilating you to the culture is like assimilating you to business culture or corporate culture, and kind of how corporations consume all the resources, just like how the Borg were first introduced as going around to other places and like just scooping up and taking all the resources everywhere. But that's neither here nor there. It doesn't have anything to do with this episode. So kind of an aside. And I explored this more in my review for Q-Who, so if you are interested and want to know, you can watch that video. But it did make me think of it watching this episode, that because, especially hearing people make comparisons to the Borg, whereas I don't necessarily see the Borg as a commentary on extreme socialism, even though that's clearly how Voyager was interpreting it. But And again, this episode, I don't necessarily take it that way either. I mean, it could be taken that way. I wouldn't say anyone's interpreting this episode as such is wrong. It's just not how I see it. It's not how I feel the context clues leads one. But anyway, yeah. So I don't really have anything to say about the specifics of the episode. It's pretty straightforward. Kirk meets, as I said, it takes him way too long to figure out what's going on. He meets up with some allies, and they get captured, and the only way they get out of it is the third unknown ally happens to be the dude in charge of brainwashing people, but it wasn't his shift when McCoy got brainwashed, so he wasn't able to do anything then, but he was able to save Kirk and Spock from it. And then Spock. Okay, so here's something I really need to talk about. Logicking the computer to death. This was really dumb. I'm sorry. This is a huge strike against the episode for me. That's not how it works. Like, especially we know in modern technology where computers, of course, have been around for a lot longer and much more common and everyday occurrence in society than they were in the 60s. It just seems dumb that the 60s, and this, Star Trek by no means was not the only sci-fi that presented this concept of logicking a computer to death. It was probably a common trope in this era, but it actually makes no sense. Like, that's not how computers work. You can't feed them contradictory information and then they would just like self-destruct and blow up because it doesn't understand what's going on. That's just not how computers work. And so I looked up in Memory Alpha. They said that there were 4 examples in the original series of Kirk talking a computer to death. Oh, I lost it, but I was just trying to see if I can remember. It was this one, Return of the Archons. It was iMud, the Changeling, and the Ultimate Computer. Now, I talked about the Ultimate Computer. He actually didn't logic the computer to death. He guilt-tripped it to death, which I thought was actually kind of cool because, because the computer was given a sense of morality, right or wrong, and so Kirk was just pointing out the fact that the computer just killed a bunch of people and that was wrong, and that made it decide to want to self-destruct. With the Changeling, with Nomad, I don't really see it so much as a logicking it to death. It wasn't a straight out like, let me feed you contradictory information. That's part of it, but I don't think that was the whole thing, because Nomad's whole mission was to wipe out things that were imperfect, or at least it believed it was, and Kirk pointed out its flawed origins and how that wasn't actually its original programming, thus proving to it that it itself is imperfect, which means it itself, by its own programming, needs to be wiped out, which is a bit of a nice little logical circle. So that makes sense to me. Like that, I think, yeah, that would even work. And so that leaves iMud in this episode, and both episodes, I think, are guilty of terrible nonsense of logicking. I think iMud might actually be worse than this episode, because they just flat out start acting weird and behaving strangely, and that causes all these androids to just self-destruct, which makes to like burn out or whatever, which is so dumb. But this episode is also another really bad example, because I think that because I had this situation where Kirk and Spock were there in the computer room with their phasers, and all of a sudden Landry does this weird thing, like goes boot, and then it's like, your weapons won't work now. I'm like, okay, so let me ask you something. Why didn't you freaking do that before? When Kirk and Spock were like phasing holes in walls and like mowing down tons of people and stunning them. Why didn't you think, if you had this ability to just go whoop and deactivate their phasers, why didn't you do this before? Just a suggestion. I'm not trying to tell you how to run your job, Landry, but but come on. But that seemed like a stupid, like, plot convenient thing Hi, Lillian. That seemed like just a stupid plot convenient thing in order to make it so Kirk couldn't just phaser the Landru and destroy it, that he had to logic it to death. But personally, I actually would have preferred that he just used the phaser to destroy it. I mean, yeah, it would be a quicker ending, but the whole logicking it to death was dumb and made no sense. I think in this situation, Kirk's argument was that Landry's whole purpose was to serve the greater good and have make society great, but then Kirk was pointing out the flaws in the society. Now you could argue this was kind of similar to the Changeling thing, but I still think it works way better in the Changeling, because Landry could just be like, well, no, you're wrong. Like, why does Landry have to take Kirk's insistent that this is bad for society at heart? It seems like Landry could just be like, no, you're wrong. Whereas in the case of the Nomad and Changeling, Nomad was purported to be logical and accepting facts, and what Kirk presented were facts of his origin, so he couldn't really deny that. Where in this case, he's not presenting facts as much as opinions, and Landry could have just very easily dismissed those opinions. The fact that it's self-destruct over it, I think, is dumb. So the whole logicking it to death was really stupid. That was a really down point of this episode, in kind of a really anticlimactic way. That's what I'm saying. Even if they just phased it and destroyed, that kind of would have been anticlimactic as well. Like, so I don't think the ending sort of justified the build up, because it presented, and they gave Landry like all these crazy powers, like it was able to destroy the Enterprise and prevent it from leaving, and like, I don't know, that was a bit ridiculous to me. But anyway, yeah, and there was actually another thing I wanted to address as far as religion analogy goes. Another thing that definitely leads me back to the religion analogy is that the whole point of Landry was, apparently this used to be a technologically advanced society, but in order to bring about peace, its idea was to revert it to a simpler time and look sort of reverted to the past, and sort of refuse, deny, and remove any advanced technology. And a lot of religions are like that too, that want to return to a simpler time, want to sort of deny the use of modern technology, and sort of glorify the past and always look to the past, and sort of, the whole dressing up in olden times, and even today I would extend that beyond religion, although it's kind of related to conservatism, which again likes to glorify the past, the 1950s and 60s, and try to revert to that and hold that up as the standard, where that's actually not the best healthy way for society. The best healthy way for society is to move forward, to advance, to progress. But anyway, my rating, wait a second. Before I get into my rating, I'm jumping the gun here. Let me thank some of the Patreons that do support the channel. The support is very much appreciated. It really helps the channel to keep going and keep growing. Is extremely appreciated. So, I want to give special thanks to Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Avals, Brian A., Alessandro Megalacio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, Brendan House. Thank you all very much for your support for the channel. It is extremely appreciated. So, I got a few Patreon comments for this episode to read. Let's see. First comment comes from Maddie Jester saying, I like this episode. It's got some themes that will be explored plenty of times by tracking the future, individualism versus collective, outsmarting the computer and causing it to break itself. There's some good stuff here. It's a shame they started worshipping Landru again in the 24th century. Haha. Joy and fulfillment to you, friends. 8 out of 10. Oh yes, he brings up Lower Decks, which I was going to mention as well. I actually just watched the first scene of Lower Decks, how they I actually thought that was hilarious how they revisited this planet over 100 years later, and they were worshiping Landru again, and Freeman is just like, why would you do this? Why would you worship this computer again? And one of them was like, but I like the Red Hour. I got this new scythe. Like, I think that was funny. And Landru itself was like, you are not of the body, you will be terminated. And then Freeman's like, shut up or I'll logic you to death. And Landru's like, Landru apologizes. Like, that was absolutely hilarious. But I think the commentary of them worshiping Landru again, I actually think that was strong commentary on how people tend to revert to support political figures or institutions that have obviously been pointed out as being not healthy and not good, such as, Nazis, Nazism, a certain recent former president whose name starts with a T, ends with a P, and in the middle is rum. Anyway, I'm not going to mention him. So, yeah, people who are very obviously should not be supported, and it has been proven to be a bad thing, and yet they regress to it. And it could not just people, but also ideas that have been proven wrong. But yeah, so I thought that was a powerful commentary in that regard, and a pretty funny scene. Anyway, next comment is by Brandon Howells, who says, I'm a sucker for hive minds and brawls, so of course I enjoy this episode. The society is somewhere between the medieval and American West. I do enjoy blissed out Sulu and Kirk and Spock logicking Landru to meltdown. And look, we get a mention of a prime directive. I always wondered if Tula was raped during the festival, though. 9 out of 10. Yeah, I was actually wondering the same thing. They keep it kind of vague. You see that they have like a shadow of a guy kind of, you can assume having sex with someone, but they never really explain if it's consensual or not. You do see some of the women initiating sexual acts, like this one woman goes up and starts making out with Kirk and they have to drag her off. So it's hard to say, and they're all being controlled by Landru. Like, is any of it consensual? Like, it gets it gets a bit blurry. I want to say, just for my clarity of mind and my sanity, say that the answer is no, that she was not, but yeah. Anyway, it's because even if they did have sex consensually, it's still kind of a form of rape because the Landru is forcing them to do it. I don't know. It's a bit blurry. I kind of didn't like that part of the episode. So yeah, it seems like Maddie and Brandon like the logicking to death thing. I do not. Just to be clear. I think it was terrible. And I didn't think of the analogy of the American West. I was thinking more of rather than the American West, more of like early settlement times in the East Coast of the United States of like pilgrims and stuff. That's what came to my mind. But then again, maybe it's like a Utah thing, because I did think of Mormonism. But anyway, Anyway, so my rating for Return of the Archons, and I'm afraid I'm going to have to be less positive than Maddie and Brandon, who obviously have more affection for this episode than I ever did. My rating for Return of the Archons out of 10 is going to be a 6. Good. It was fine. I think in the past I would have given this episode a poor rating. I think up to fairly recently, just a few years ago, I gave this episode like a 4, 3, or 5. But watching it now, it's like, it's not terrible. Like, it's not actively bad like some of these original series episodes are. It's just, I don't think there's enough there. Like, it doesn't really strike me as one of the more interesting or one of the more better episodes. I know I just said more better, but that's fine. One of the more better episodes of the original series, because, yeah, I mean, it has a anti-religion message, which I can completely get behind, but again, yeah, I'm kind of distanced from cult stuff themed episodes, and even if you don't think this is one, it's just, I don't know, it's too simple. It's like Kirk beamed down, they tries to get brainwashed, they get captured, but they manage to escape from this help from this guy, and they destroy the machine by logicking. It's just like, I don't know, there's just not enough meat on this bones for me. So, anywho, that is it for my review for Return of the Archons. Let's see what will be coming up next. So, next, we'll be back on Patreon on Thursday for my revisited For a Taste of Armageddon, one of my favorite TOS episodes. So it'll be great to revisit that review. And then on Saturday, back here on the main channel for a new review of Space Seed, an episode. So I go from an episode I think is incredibly underrated to one that I think is incredibly overrated. Space Seed, which I shall talk about in just a couple days on my channel. However, one thing I did want to mention, because it's a strange occurrence for me, because I usually don't record these videos super far in advance. However, I'm recording this video in early December, right before I leave for my trip to New Zealand. And while I'm in New Zealand for 3 weeks, I won't be recording any videos. So these videos I mentioned, A Taste of Armageddon, Space Seed, I will not return until late December, early January when I get back. So there's going to be like a month in between when I'm recording these videos for me, but for you guys, you'll just get them the day after, a couple days later. So I don't know, it doesn't really mean much, but it seems kind of weird to me. Anyway, so I don't wonder if I'll look different after my trip. Probably not. Anyway, thanks so much for watching and supporting the channel. Be sure to check out my channel, as I do many more reviews for Star Trek, the original series, and many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.